and welcome back to Crafters Grow. Today is part 2 of building this floating shadow box. Today I'm going to show you how to sculpt lettering out of polymer clay. So if you're interested, stay tuned. Definitely have a good project for you today. So first we need to pick the color that we're going to use for the lettering. You want to pick something that's going to match the other parts of the piece as well, so that's why I have the frame here and we're working alongside the trees. Picking a color that is already in the piece helps with that coordination bit, but you could also pick something that's contrasting or pops out from the rest. I really want the sign to be cohesive and coordinated, so I've picked the green that you can see in the second layer in the leaves of the trees. So after you've softened the clay, you're going to want to roll it just like we did for the trunks of the trees. We're going to use much larger rolls and pieces than we did for the trunks, just to really make that lettering pop out, but otherwise it's pretty similar in the technique. You want to ensure that you're rolling the piece evenly to ensure that there's consistency throughout the lettering. So keeping the diameter consistent throughout the piece is important. You'll find after you've cut the clay to the size that you want for the lettering, which I've done with a putty knife or a painter's knife, you will see that cut end on the piece. So what you can do is tap the ends to get rid of that cut end, which can distort the clay a little bit, so then doing some rolling afterwards to reshape is important. And then you're just going to repeat this process of tapping and rolling as much as needed to get the piece to look uniform. Once you're happy with the result, you can begin shaping, and we're going to start by shaping the C. Once you're happy with how you form the letter, pressing it down slightly to the parchment paper will just help it keep its shape until the baking process. So throughout the piece, once the first letter is made, you really want to pay attention to the sizing of the putty that you're rolling. Keeping it the same size as the first letter or the same diameter will help keep consistency in your piece. If you want inconsistent lettering sizes, that's okay too. That's quite a fun style. But if you want consistency and more professionalism in the overall style, make sure you're paying attention to size and diameter. So next we're forming the G. Because I want both the C and the G to be larger than the rest of the lettering, doing those first together will help make sure they're uniform and around the same size. The G is a little bit long, so I'm just trimming off the extra piece and then repeating the tapping and the forming again. Form the R, you want to take the lower 2/3 and fold them in half, pressing them gently into one another. Then you're taking the longer piece of the R and curving it into a gentle arc. In order to form an A, you're taking the bottom 2/3 and forming them into a circle, and then leaving the other third as a tail, almost a straight piece coming out from the other circle bit. The great thing about clay is you can continue to form as many options of the letter as you like and then pick whichever one you like best. This is a really great way to practice your fine motor skills and to practice your sculpting skills as well. In order to form an F, I really thought of it in 4 pieces instead of thirds. So the top half you're rounding into an arc, kind of like the R, and then the bottom half you're folding into itself, then doing the tiniest arc from the bottom bit of the clay, which ends up being about halfway through your F, to form the lower half of the F. Don't be afraid to do a little bit of reshaping or re-rolling with your piece as you need to. It might damage the piece and you might have to start over, but you do have almost a limitless supply of clay, as you can always rework it. So being happy with your final piece is more important than letting something slide because you're afraid of you losing a piece. So I don't have a specific design in mind for the T. I've done a line with a folded half bar. Now I want to try a line with a full bar and then maybe we'll see how adding another half to that half bar T looks like and seeing which one I like best. So really I think you could go with any of these T designs, but I like especially the two separate pieces with the full mid bar for the T. So I'm just laying that there for now, and I'm going to press them in together to finalize the overall layout later on in this piece. So creating an E in this font style is very similar to creating an A. We want to roll 2/3 of this strip of clay together and then leave a bit of a tail. The difference being is that the first roll should be a lot tighter than in the A. You can also try to flatten that middle piece as you see here. And then instead of leaving a straight tail, you're rolling or arcing that last bit as well to just about join a full circle, but not quite. You need to leave that space to really make it appear as an E. Oh, so I just realized I'm missing the T from Crafter's Grove in the template. Well, glad I picked that up before I finished the piece. Anyways, that's quite a good reason why you should make a template, because you might pick up on that error before you even start your piece, or it might help you recognize the error before you finish the piece. Either way, the more planning you do, the less likely you are to make a fatal mistake like that. So forming the S is really just about creating two separate curves, the lower one being bigger than the upper one. I found making those curves at the same time was a lot easier than doing two separate ones, because as you curve a piece of clay, it does tend to distort the other parts where you're holding it. So if you can combine those curves at the same time, you just use that distortion to your advantage to create the curves you want to make. Also remember to check in with the overall sizing of your frame to make sure that the sizing of your font hasn't gotten too large that everything won't fit inside the frame. So I need to do a little bit of rearranging here just to make sure that everything will indeed fit nicely and not have to overlap to stay inside the border. Making the apostrophe for the plural possessive crafters is really the simplest of all the lettering. I've just had a little tiny bit of rolled clay, which I'm now going to put a tiny bit of an arch in after finishing off the edges, and that really gives it that apostrophe feel. In order to keep consistency in your piece, when you're doing repeat lettering, it's really important to follow the same style of the original lettering and then comparing your finished product to a previous finished product. So here we have 3 R's. It's really important to keep those consistent. Now for the O in Crafter's Grove, it's simply a matter of curving the clay completely around itself and then gently combining the two ends together to get them to stick into the O, and then rounding out once more to give that perfect circular O shape. To form a V, you want to bend right in the center of the clay, but not bending all the way, just enough to give that really pointy bottom, and then leaving a gap between the two ends at the top. Okay, so the lettering's all done. All that's left is to throw it in the oven and bake it according to the instructions on your packaging. Stay tuned for part 3, where I'm going to be finishing off the frames, gluing the Crafter's Grove onto the glass, and then securing the frames together and making it one final floating shadow box. Make sure to subscribe to be notified when the next episode comes out.